Before we get started, I have a favor to ask for everyone. Please take out your cell phones and make sure they're at least on vibrate. Thank you. I would like to welcome you to this community forum on Sedona Home Rule, hosted by the League of Women Voters, Greater Verde Valley. My name is Mary Shaquin of the League of Women Voters, Greater Verde Valley, and I am your moderator for this evening's forum. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, envisions a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. There are many who are not able to be with us here this evening, and we know would like to see all of the presentations. So Verde Valley TV is taping the entire forum this evening, and it will be shown on Verde Valley TV or YouTube channel. It will also be shown on Cable 1, Channel 56, and Suddenlink, Channel 2. In addition, the forum this evening is being live streamed by the Sedona Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Bureau on Facebook. Great, thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to point out a couple of key people. The first is Mary Gassaway, sitting up here in the front. She has time cards. She will control the timing of all of the presentations and the responses to individuals' questions. She's got a 3-minute, a 1-minute, 30-second, and stop. If stop doesn't work, then I get to play. In addition, we also have other members of the league that are here. There are several walking around. I'm sure you met many of them coming in. They will be walking around and collecting the 3x5 cards that you received so that we can get all of the questions from the audience. So please, if you have a card and you have a question, raise the card and raise your hand so that we can see them. Then you know what? I would ask that some of the cards be handed out. The purpose of this forum is to inform and educate ourselves about Sedona Home Rule, which is on the August 28th primary election ballot. The forum this evening has 4 sections. The first is a 15-minute presentation on Home Rule. The second is 2 10-minute presentations from the proponents and opponents of Home Rule measure. That will be followed by questions and answers from you, the audience. The questions will be coming from you. And finally, we will end tonight's forum with 2-minute closing statements from each side. Before we get started, there are a few guidelines. I know all of you know them and will follow them anyway, but just for protocol, I'm going to go through them. The moderator's role is to manage the forum fairly for all participants and the audience, with the goal to keep the discussion moving forward. The forum speakers, proponents, and opponents are to be respectful of each other's points of view, speak their mind freely but not engage in personal attacks, and the speakers should not interrupt each other. You, the audience, is asked to refrain from applauding or in any other way demonstrating support or non-support of any of the speakers. Written questions from the audience will be handed to league members helping at the forum. Questions will be sorted by topic, then handed to me. I will then present the question to the proponents and opponents. Just so you know, if you should direct a question to one side, the other side will also be answering the question. Both sides will be answering every question this evening. Time limits on presentations and responses to questions will be strictly observed. The timekeeper will hold up cards visible to the speakers, indicating how much time remains. When the stop card is shown, the speaker must end his or her comments. And if they don't, then I'll just nudge them a little. I know there's a table in the back. I have seen information passed out. So if you haven't received some of the information on the different issues, I believe they're at the back table right back there. Finally, if these guidelines are not adhered to, we will have to end the forum. And I know that will not be an issue, but just so that we know. Now I would like to introduce the speakers in support and opposition to the bond measure. Speaking in support of Home Rule are Andrea Christelle and Holly Ploog. And speaking in opposition to home rule are Donna Joy Varney and Mike Schrader. As you hear the presentations from our speakers, please write your questions on the 3x5 cards. I ask when you're writing the questions to be respectful, also to write legibly so that we can read what you're saying, okay? And make it in the form of a question, if at all possible. At this time, we will begin with a 15-minute presentation by Justin Clifton, who is the city manager of the city of Sedona. Following Justin's presentation, we will open to the floor for a few minutes if there are any clarification questions that need to be asked. Justin will be providing no opinions. He will just be clarifying his presentation if there are questions that you have regarding that.
Thank you very much, Mary. And it's really nice to see so many people here for local democracy. So, home rule. It's already been covered that it's part of the August 28th primary ballot, so we'll jump right in. To the rest, I'm going to speak a little bit quickly to try to get through all of the content. So, where does it come from? In 1980, the voters passed an amendment to the Constitution that imposes limits on spending for Arizona cities and towns. That formula is adjusted for population growth and inflation, but it's not adjusted for other things such as service levels or new services that a community might introduce. Home rule is one of 3 alternatives to the state-imposed limit, and I'll spend most of the time clarifying what that means, but there are 2 others, and I'll mention those and speak about them a little bit. One is called a permanent base adjustment. A permanent base adjustment functions much in the same way that the state-imposed limit does, in that it is adjusted by population change and inflation, but it is setting a new base limit. So opposed to the one that was started in 1980, you can basically reset that number, any number you choose really, and that's what a permanent base adjustment does. And then lastly, there's a one-time override. The one-time override is what it sounds like. It enables, with voter approval, the local government to set a new spending limit for just 1 year. Home rule, which I'll spend most of the time talking about, basically allows the city council to establish a budget based on available resources. Those could be resources that were accumulated in previous years or resources that come in a given fiscal year, but certainly that spending is limited to those available resources. So in other words, it authorizes the city to set its own budget. In order to maintain home rule, the city must seek voter approval every 4 years. In other words, if it is passed, it's in place for 4 years, and then the city, if it chose to maintain that spending authority, would need to seek permission again from the voters.
Just a second. We have it not changing.
No, it's...
if you're changing, they're not.
Oh, I see. I'm like, no, it's just right. I apologize. Yep, technical difficulties. Yeah, whatever on that screen is not changing.
It's not working, Robin. It's not changing up on the screen?
Yeah, we've got that screen on.
Side. The sides up on the screens are not moving.
I'm running out of time. How fun would these be if we didn't have at least one hitch, right? Okay, that's something.
Best I can do.
Okay, can you just give me the slide view there? From the beginning,
I think
fine.
the problem is that what you're set up in PowerPoint is...
Yeah, give it a shot.
That's going to go
Nope, we're good. Okay. So I've covered most of that. One more quick point of clarification. Home rule is also the alternative expenditure limitation. So you'll see reference to both. They mean the same thing. Real briefly on history, last I knew, 87% of Arizona cities and towns do something other than the state-imposed limit. So a small group, about 13%, live within that limit totally. The rest do something different, primarily meaning the permanent base adjustment or home rule. The split among that group is a little less than 2/3 home rule and a little more than 1/3 choosing for the permanent base adjustment. So I've been asked to address a handful of questions. One of those was, why did the city elect to put forward the home rule and not a permanent base adjustment? So what I can speak to is the kinds of conversations that staff has had with council over time on this issue, and try not to get too, complicate the two issues. But as I said, home rule allows the council to set its own budget. Permanent base changes what was established in 1980, but does establish a fixed limit based on voter approval. When staff has presented to council some of the challenges with a permanent base adjustment, they come down to a handful of things. Uncertainty of service needs is a big one. Right after the city incorporated, for instance, the regulators came in and said, you must have a sewer plant. The city didn't have a choice, and the state-imposed limit does not provide an exclusion for those new expenditures. In other words, they're still subject to the limit. Likewise, when development changes, when growth occurs and you need more building inspectors, or when there's added traffic and we want to put some of the traffic control aids out there to help move things along, the challenge is setting a limit that's appropriate for those sometimes unanticipated changes, whether they be regulatory or whether they be voluntary responses to citizen requests. Volatility and cost. Well, there are a number of things we do that are fairly stable. For instance, with our roads, we pave 4 to 5 miles per year, and it's an amount that keeps us sustainable with the system. Many other expenses don't quite work that way. So capital expenses, major maintenance, those things change quite a bit year to year. One year you might be replacing a $300,000 generator, the next year it's a $3 million lift station. So again, what is the right limit so that you can account for some of the things that you can't always predict? One vulnerability is that it's possible that a permanent base adjustment encourages debt financing. The reason is because your debt service payments are excluded. In other words, they don't count against you when you are talking about that limit. So whatever that limit is, if the city council is running up near it and looking for ways to continue to fund operations, one thing it may decide to do is finance more of its needs instead of cash fund its needs, because that debt service is excluded and doesn't count against the limit. And then lastly, you just have to pick the right number. If the number is low and revenues grow, whether it's because there's a new service added like a wastewater facility that is accompanied by billing, or whether it's just growth in the economy, at some point you risk having revenues available, services that are either needed or desired, but a limit that doesn't allow them to be spent. One of the other questions we get often, will the taxes decrease? The answer is no. None of these state expenditure limit, permanent base adjustment, home rule, none of them affect the tax rate. They're all about expenditures. So on August 29th, when we wake up, regardless of the outcome of the vote, tax rate will remain the same. Any revenues that the city has that can't be spent for any reason, based on any limit, would essentially sit in a bank until or unless the council decided to change that tax rate. So a no vote, what does it mean? In fiscal year 20, we project about a $49.5 million budget. That's a little higher than the budgets approved the last couple years. It applies a standard inflationary factor. The state-imposed limit is $13.5 million, okay? So there's quite a difference there between those two numbers. Good news is there are a number of things that are excluded from the limit. They don't count against you. I'll refer to them as exclusions and explain a little bit more about the nuance of those. But we project about $10.8 million in those exclusions in fiscal year 20. That means we'd have about a $24.3 million budget, or total limit, I should say, and to cut the $49.5 million budget to that amount, we'd be cutting about 51%, okay? A quick note about the exclusions, because this is a point that I think is difficult to understand. I don't think it would be appropriate for anybody to look at the 13.5 and the 10.8, add them together and say the city can spend this much money. While that is true, there are lots of nuanced context within those exclusions. Firstly, a lot of it is debt. Okay, so the $6 million of debt payments the city makes are excluded, but that can't be spent on something else. Things like grants. I know that there's a $1.3 million grant in that 10.8 number. Well, firstly, it obligates $1.3 million to be spent that is subject to the limit, and if you can't do that, you don't get the 1.3 that's excluded. And furthermore, or in the next year, for example, if that grant's not there, those exclusions are then reduced. So it's not as though you can move expenses around between those two amounts. The exclusions are not discretionary spending. They're a very narrowly defined number of expenditures. So they shouldn't be combined to think of spending allowance. There's really a base amount, and then the exclusions could be as small or as large. It just depends on what expenses qualify and which ones don't. Sorry, it looks like I missed some of that slide. So I'm putting up on screen now just a list of expenditures. This excludes debt. This is based on that $49.5 million forecast. I just want you to glance and see the kinds of spending that is anticipated as part of that budget. Near the bottom of the page, you'll see $10.1 million for Sedona in Motion or transportation projects. I'm not going to say what would be spent in this scenario if we were subject to a different limit. That decision would be made by your city council. But what you can do is look at that and ask yourself, what would I cut if I wanted to live within, say, a 24 or something between $13 and $24 million or any other adjusted limit? You know, some of those transportation projects require administrative support, so you can't always just look at the one number, but you get a general feel. In a case where you got rid of the exclusions, just put them to the side for a second, fully funded your wastewater and fully funded your police, which are pretty significant, you'd be cutting the rest of the budget 96% to meet the state-imposed limit, okay? That's not a plan, that's not a budget, but it does create some context about current levels of spending and some of our programmatic costs and the state-imposed limit. So what does the yes vote do? Basically, it continues to enable your local elected officials to establish a budget based on available resources. Most likely services, projects, and those kinds of things continue more or less as normal, although of course the caveat is any elected officials now or after this election or after future elections make those decisions. So I don't want to presume a budget would be identical, but at least the spending authority that provides for those kind of services and projects would be maintained. Little quick word about city budgeting practices. We go through quite a lot. We start that process in January typically. It concludes in July. That's a lot of staff time. There's a citizen review panel that spends hours and hours combing through things before it goes to council. Council spends its time as well. For the last 17 years, the city's received awards from the Government Finance Officers Association for transparency and financial reporting. We have annual independent audits that are clean and an A bond rating. Quickly on city budgeting practices and historic context for expenses. What you're looking at now is budgeted expenses. Toward the left side of that graph, you'll see the years, roughly 2006, if that's too difficult to see, goes through 2019. The budgets prior to the recession, the 4 or 5 there, are right around the $50 to $60 million mark. They dipped down quite a bit in 2011 when things got pretty bad, and then they start to climb back up out of the recession to where we are now in the mid-40s, upper 40s. If you want to look at actual expenses, it is true that our budgets are typically higher than actual expenses. We build in contingencies for emergencies and things like that. So actual expenses, the curve is relatively similar, although the dollars are smaller. So before the recession, you see budgets approaching 35 up into $40 million range. They dip down in the recession again, and as we've recovered, are back to similar spending levels compared to before the recession. And then lastly, with our full-time equivalent positions. So that adds up all the little part-time positions and creates one full-time equivalency. Similar story, positions upwards of 140, 150, 160 before the recession. There are a lot of cuts. That's not only because there's less revenues, but because there's less activity. There's less building. There's less of the things that demand services. As we come out of that recession, as those circumstances change and employees are added, you can see we're back to a level not quite before the recession, but certainly higher than the bottom of that recession. So one more time, alternative expenditure limit, AKA home rule. Yes means your Sedona City Council continues to set its budget based on available resources. No, we fall back to the state-imposed limitation. I would encourage you to do any and all research you can to better understand the facts. I've put up on the screen just a couple resources for you. I can tell you this is not just a statement about election time. It applies to anything and everything. And all the time I've been doing this, it's just inevitable that good, engaged people hear something and tell somebody else, and the story starts to change a little bit. So it's really common that some of the factual information either gets misunderstood or misconstrued. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to the city if it pertains to city business and things that can be verified by fact, and we'd be more than happy to help anytime. That's it.
If you could just stay up here, Justin, for me. As I said, Justin is willing to answer any questions for clarification, and I have a couple, so we're going to start with mine while you're thinking about some that you have. We know that on the August 28th ballot, we've got the choice for home rule or against home rule. Then we also have on the ballot the permanent base adjustment in November. What's the ramification of those two? You know, what happens if we have yes or no, and then we also then have the November vote? How do they impact each other?
I had been asked by council to analyzed the implications of the state-imposed expenditure limit. I have not done anything similar on a permanent base adjustment. So what I can clarify is that if both pass, and I should add the caveat that I've been given a few interpretations of what happens. The Auditor General has opined on this, and I think that's certainly worth something. And that opinion is home rule would prevail during the time at which it was in play. In other words, if it's passed, there's home rule for 4 years, regardless of whether a permanent base adjustment passes. If the permanent base adjustment also passes in November, that would mean upon the expiration of home rule, the permanent base adjustment would persist from that point forward, again adjusted for population change and inflation, and never again would there be the state-imposed limit.
I have one more. What happens with any money that comes in above the expenditure limit? Because the city could be earning or getting money that's over the base limit that we have. So what would happen to that money?
Yeah, and that could be money that comes in the future, or it could be money that's accumulated today, frankly, because there have been revenues in excess of operations expenditures for the last number of years that have been put into a capital improvements fund, some of that dedicated to transportation projects. Ultimately, if there's any limit that prohibits us from spending those dollars, they continue to sit in a bank until there is such time that there's authority to spend them. Certainly, a council could decide to do something different with incoming revenues. Some of those are accumulated already, but regardless, if there's anything in excess of the spending limit, it can't be spent and it sits somewhere. Yeah.
Are there any questions from the floor? Yes, ma'am. Sherry, you want to stand up for us?
I just wonder how much is actually in the bank more than what we would be limited to.
Yeah. And I apologize. Are you asking how much is there if there were a limit imposed, or?
If there were, so permanent base passed,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's $36 million.
My understanding is the adjusted base is 25 something, and if there were 10.8 roughly in exclusions, it would get to a total spending limit close to 36 or in that neighborhood.
How much more than that does Sedona have?
Well, on an incoming basis, I don't think much. In accumulated reserves, we pledged upwards of $10 million toward transportation projects as an example. So it would depend on how much of that the city wanted to spend in a given year. It would not be possible, I don't believe, to continue our operations and our capital improvements plan as it is set right now, and then add expenses for any other capital projects, because we're in the neighborhood, perhaps over by a couple million or close to that limit currently.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, how would sales tax change under either scenario, whether it passes or fails? Like, for example, you just said there is reserves for capital improvements, yet we just got a sales tax increase for capital improvements.
Right, right. So the sales tax rate would not change unless council takes any subsequent action. The vote is really just about expenditure limits. So you're right, there's about 10 million of the accumulated capital dollars were pledged to transportation projects, which was not sufficient to address the projects that council was inclined to pursue, which required an additional roughly 25 million over a 10-year period from the additional tax. So those were combined to create a roughly $35 million pot for those projects.
Yes, ma'am.
If the permanent base adjustment passes, and you said it would not go into effect until 4 years after the home rule, if it passes, the permanent base adjustment, I think, is at 36?
Well, again, my understanding is there's an adjusted base of about 25 plus whatever qualifies as excluded expenses, and that changes year to year.
Okay. How long are you held to the 36 if it passes, and then is there a process to increase that?
Okay, the 36, as I understand it, the permanent base adjustment continues to adjust like the original state-imposed limit by population change and inflation, but not by other factors such as increased services. So if it started at a base amount of 25, which is really the relevant number here, that number would continue to adjust by population change and inflation in perpetuity. Now, the exclusions are unique. So for instance, I mentioned in that 10.8 that's estimated for FY20, 1.3 million of that is a grant. So if the grant goes away, it's no longer 10.8, it's 9.5. About 6 million of that right now is debt. If that debt is retired and the city is otherwise already spending up to that $25 million limit, that 6 cannot simply go over to the other category and be spent. Because it's excluded in one case, it is not excluded in the other. So those are the implications of that limit. It's hard to speculate into the future because it depends. If council wanted to finance most of its projects, you could do so and probably stay somewhere close to that limit because those would be excluded costs. But you could not shift those funds to operations, and if they weren't things like grants or other excluded costs, you could not otherwise spend them. You'd be subject to the $25 million base, adjusted for population change and inflation.
I'm going to have to start limiting this because we have our other speakers here.
They'll be more interesting than me, I assure you.
No, Justin. But what I'm going to ask you to do, because there are a lot of hands that are up, Justin is more than willing to take your phone calls, to answer your emails. Well, okay, within reason.
It's true. It's true. I'll refrain from giving my cell phone tonight, but it's true.
Okay, thank you. Because we would continue with all of your questions, and we would not, like I said, have an opportunity to hear other speakers.
Okay.
So thank you, Justin, very much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of your questions.
People can also, if they want, submit the questions, and if they were going to specify, we'll get them out.
Perfect. If you didn't hear Kathy, if you have a question for the city or Justin, write that on the card and put that at the top of your 3x5 card. We will get them to Justin, and then he could address the answers, and we will find a method that all those answers could be communicated. Donna and Mike are going to be up next. At this time, we are going to hear from our speakers from the opposing side of home rule and then the side that is in favor of home rule. Prior to the forum this evening, both sides took a number so that we could be fair as to who was going to start first. And Donna Joy and Mike, who are opposed to home rule, will be first on our agenda. They will have 10 minutes to make their presentation, and they will be sharing the spotlight, and I understand they're going to be using my microphone. Okay.
Okay, Sedona voter-controlled options. When you look at Sedona's historical balance, you can see that the tourists are lighter and the residents are heavier. Nowadays, when you look, the tourists are the heavier portion of our community and the residents have less impact. Sedona's desired balance would be a level playing field where residents and tourists are merged together in one happy family. There's an intense conversation for this August 28th choice, yes or no, on home rule. And that's because we've had a lack of leadership at the city council level. We've used scare tactics propagated by the city staff, and we have a campaign election, Arizona Elections PAC 18, that are primarily funded by the hospitality or lodging and promoted by the chamber. Oops.
Thank you, Donna. Welcome, folks. Glad you're all here. Just to get into this pretty quick, and I'm going to raise this because I think I'm a little bit taller. Thank you. This is basically what you've been presented for quite some time. Home rule passes, home rule fails. It's a catastrophe. The city's got to run on $24 million. You've heard that number for several weeks, more than several weeks, as a matter of fact. And then we have this 49.5 million, on the high end. And I think we need to kind of clarify this big spread that we've been hearing about. And the big spread is false. It's a false choice because neither will ever happen. The $24.3 million on the low side, it's just not going to happen, period. That's a decision you'll make in November, and you'll make the right decision, so it's not, why are we even talking about it? The 49.5 includes $10 million of Sedona in motion, and I don't know how you're going to spend $10 million in a year with the projects that are out there, with the problems that they're already seeing. the issues that have come up, going through neighborhoods, the uptown, and this kind of thing. You need to kind of take a look at that and see a lot of the feedback that's coming back. So what this really vote talks about right now is changing the face of Sedona, especially in uptown. A total different look, a total different feel from what it is today. Roundabout taking tables away from a restaurateur, parking places going away, 2 lanes coming down to the canyon, speeding up traffic to get to the Y quicker. So to think that they're going to spend that money that first year is just, it's unimaginable. So November 6th ballot is an initiative for a permanent base adjustment. Justin talked about it. It will pass. Citizens Initiative will give you, the voters, another choice. And why? Because the City Council failed to do its fiduciary duty to provide this financial safety net. They had multiple opportunities going back to April, and they didn't want to do it. If you watched any of our commercials, you can see that they didn't want to do it. It's not me making it up, folks. It's the council. They just did not want to take action. If they'd have taken action, they could have established it, and we wouldn't be here tonight. So this is what you're going to have to work with. Voter-approved permanent base adjustment, $36 million. And Justin said correctly, it escalates automatically with inflation and population up to $39.2 million, estimated at a 3% inflation rate, over the 4-year period of time that his current home rule projections get him up to about 42.9. So looking out, they almost coincide. The City of Sedona expenditure levels, if you look at the far left, that's the average 5-year from 2013 going out is $33.4 million. 32.5 was 2016 fiscal year, and what they're looking at right now from 2017 is maybe a 39.7. We're not sure yet because all the numbers aren't in. You got $36 million. Can you run the city on $36 million today? Yes. It's a hard fact, $36 million. Forget the 24.3. It's not even in the conversation and shouldn't have been. This is the breakdown of those numbers by category. And if you take a look at that, you know, one of the things that I question is we have 2% population growth since 2000 to 2017. Tourism has been 3 to 4 million. I mean, that's the number I was given back in the mid-2000s and early 2000s when we were doing the 179 project for 4 years. But the last 4 years, since the last permanent base adjustment, we've had a 20% increase in staff. Inflation's over. You know, the recovery's over. That's just 4 years ago, folks. And you got a 63% increase in salaries. Adjusted down for inflation, it's about a 38 to 40%. So why do we have all these extra people? Why are we doing this thing when we've got no growth? Same amount of people, same number of tourists coming through. Doesn't make any sense. The top figure is the $13 million, and that is your personnel expenses. That carries forward. There's waste in there, there's cuts in there, and if you watch Justin's presentation on June 26th when he was telling the council how you could get down to $24 million, there's a whole bunch of things he was talking about that you could probably do without here, there, and elsewhere. Why isn't he doing it now? That's a good question you need to ask yourselves. Ask Justin. Put it on a card. We also have the supplies and services. Supplies and services. All the 501c3s have been told they're going to lose everything. That's where that comes from, out of that blue box. You see any changes when you go to 36? Not going to happen. So don't buy it. You got a red number down here, and the red number is your debt service. And as you see, it goes up and down. As that goes up and down, you still have 36 to work with. And then on the bottom here, you've got your capital expenditures, which, interestingly enough, are the same as in the 32 point, or back there in the 2016, was this pretty much the same as they could be under 36. They were a little bit higher in 2017, 2018. But the 28, and you know, who knows what you can do with that. I'm not sure. I know that you still got $5.7 million that you're looking at for capital improvements, and a lot of the Sedona in Motion stuff doesn't take a lot of money to do. It just doesn't. There's things that could be done today that could start mitigating our traffic problem and some of the other issues that we have. And personally, I know where another $2.5 million can come from that's in that blue bar, because I think it's time to stop promoting Sedona to the world for at least 2 years. No, can't do that. Don't do that. That's legal. That's legal. That's something that we should seriously consider. Everybody on the planet knows where Sedona is. I travel all over the world. I did it when I was in my business. I do it today. And when people ask me where I'm from, I say Sedona, Arizona. I say, oh yeah, we know that place, or our tour guide knows that place. They don't know where Kansas is. They don't know where Nebraska is, but they know where Sedona, Arizona is. And the mayor made that statement the other day at the mayor debate. There's millions of ways that people know about Sedona. So we need to take a real hard look at why we're spending $2.5 million to promote this town when you got people, Williams, they don't do that anymore. You got towns that are shutting down their Chamber of Commerces. They're hiring marketing destination people. You know why they're doing it? Because that little black box is sitting there on the table. If I want to know, if I go someplace and I want to find out what the neat places to see, I'll let Google tell me. And that's what's happening to a lot of industries around the country. So this is your timeline. Home rule, 828. Permanent base adjusted, 11.6, and not every one of you will vote for it. I know it because there's not one person in this room that wants to take a nickel away from this city based on what's been spent. Got a one-time override, emergency situation, got big money coming in, got a big project. City Council every May with a 2/3 vote can come up with a number, and you guys get to decide whether that's a good number or not. And then you can do it again, 5/19/20, and then we come back here on 8/25/20, 2020, we do it all over again. But hopefully it's not going to be this contentious because we'll have things figured out. Maybe we'll have a new council in there that'll take some responsibilities and actually lead the city like they should. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Donna Joy. We all set? Ryan, we'll need the microphone on the table over here. Thank you. Our next presenters who will be speaking for 10 minutes are Holly Ploog and Andrea Christelle, who will be presenting in favor of the home rule on the August 28th ballot.
Hi, everybody. My name is Holly Ploog. I've been a Sedona resident for 5 years. I'm a retired attorney and corporate executive. For 29 years, I worked for Fortune 500 companies, and for 7 years, state and municipal government. I serve on the Budget Workgroup Committee, the Budget Oversight Workgroup Committee, and I've been on that committee for 4 budget cycles. I'm not running for public office, but I am asking you for your vote tonight. I'm asking you to vote yes on home rule on August 28th.
Okay, hi everybody. First, we just want to thank the League of Women Voters of the Greater Verde Valley for putting on this forum and thank Mary Shaquin for moderating. And we especially want to thank all of you for being here tonight. My name is Andrea Christelle, and I've lived in Sedona since 2011. I am not retired, okay? I own a small business, Sedona Philosophy. It's an Arizona benefit corporation, and I'm also a member of Sedona XYZ. Sedona XYZ is a new group of young business owners and professionals who are interested in economic vitality in Sedona and also making a positive contribution. Like Holly, I'm here to ask for your yes vote on Sedona Home Rule. Now, we have already been through a lot of facts and information, and it is really possible to get into the weeds on this issue. So what I want to do, first of all, is to pull us back and state very simply what is at stake. A yes vote on home rule means local control. It means the City Council will have the authority to set and pass a budget according to their available resources. A no vote means that we will be subject to state-imposed restrictions. So at its basic level, that's what's at stake. Okay, one concern that people have seem to have is about taxation. So one thing to keep in mind is how lucky we are to live in Sedona and enjoy all sorts of services that are paid for largely by the visitors that come here and pay sales tax. Approximately 70% of the general fund in the city are provided by bed taxes and sales tax. Now, if we live in Sedona, we don't pay any bed tax unless we stay in a hotel inside the city limits, which most of us don't do. And of the sales tax that is generated, it's estimated that about 66% of that comes from visitors. So Sedona residents are only paying about 34% of the sales tax. So again, we're very fortunate to live in a city where we enjoy all sorts of services that we don't pay for directly. And unlike many other communities in the Verde Valley, we don't pay any property tax in the city of Sedona, and we also don't pay tax on our groceries. Now, we're not the only community dealing with this. Home rule was imposed by the state in the 1980s, and so it's worth considering how other communities across Arizona have handled this. And 54% of them, like us, have home rule. 32% have a permanent base adjustment, and just 14% are under the state spending limitation. So home rule has really worked well for Arizona in generally and for Sedona specifically. Our city has been operating very responsibly under home rule for the last 22 years, and Holly's going to tell you more about that now.
So I know it's complicated. Numbers are always complicated. But I just want to tell you, as a member of the Citizen Budget Workgroup, and several other members are sitting in the audience tonight, Sedona has always had a balanced budget. Actually, that's a state requirement. And your citizen, us, your citizens, we represent you on this Citizen Budget Work Group. We meet for 5 months of the year. We meet with every department head. We meet with the city manager, assistant city manager, finance officers, all the leadership of the city. We go line by line, item by item through the budget. We make sure that the budget is fiscally conservative. Every department head has to justify its spending. We ensure that this meets council priorities and the community plan. And believe me, we debate and discuss, they're laughing, we debate and discuss all these items and make recommendations to the city council. Now, there are third parties who have also recognized Sedona, so it's not just your citizens or what the city is telling you. For 18 years, the city has received an Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association, and only 25.9% of the cities across the country with our population size receive this recognition. And the recognition is for transparency. We go above and beyond what is required under general accounting principles to make available to the residents of this community information on the city budget process and the city numbers. We also have an A bond rating from Standard & Poor's, which allows us to get the lowest interest rates possible for any financing that we do. Okay, I know numbers make people crazy, but on your chair is a copy of this graph, and I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, numbers can be manipulated. I think everybody knows that. So these numbers show pre-recession, Great Recession, and post-recession actual expenditures and budgeted amounts. So the red line is the budget, and the green line are the expenditures. So take this home and look at them, because if you start your analysis at the lowest level of spending, and you look at that in 2011, and then you go to 2018, you're going to see greater increases than if you start in 2006 and you go to 2018. So please study this when you get home. I know that's everybody's desire to do. I also want to point out that in 2009, pre-recession, the budget expenditures, or the actual expenditures, were close to what the budget is in this fiscal year. Okay, very quickly, because I'm getting the high sign and Andrea has more to say. We, the citizens, believe that the city did a wonderful job during the recession to match spending with the revenues, and we were very fortunate that our revenues only declined 14% from the height to the lowest level. And unlike what you've been reading, there was not one penny of reserve funds spent. So all those reserves stayed in the bank and were still available, and we managed our spending in accordance with our revenues.
Holly's given you a lot of reasons to explain the responsible fiscal management of the city of Sedona and why you should vote again yes for home rule. Now I'm going to tell you what is likely to happen if home rule does not pass. The budget will be cut by 51%. There will be no traffic improvements. All right. Holly mentioned that we did not have capital improvements during the recession. We're in a position to move forward those now and make traffic improvements, but without passing home rule, we won't be able to do that. There will also be no support for the Tourism Bureau function, and tourism is a major economic driver in Sedona. We would also likely do without funding for the library, the community center, the Humane Society, Sedona Recycles, the high school resource officer, and we did lose the high school resource officer during the recession. We were very happy to put that back in place, the community pool, and more. We would lose all of these Sedona City services, yet we would have the revenue to fund them. The money would simply be sitting in the bank.
I wanted to talk just a minute about the permanent base adjustment. This will be a possible ballot initiative in November, and as Justin said, if we run out of money, it encourages debt financing. I was a part of the Fiscal Sustainability Workgroup, and our philosophy was pay as you go. We did not want to incur any additional debt. If we don't have enough money, under the permanent base adjustment, we'll be forced into debt financing. Now take a look at the screen, because these are some cities who have the permanent base adjustment. And what you'll notice is that the only city that has a permanent base adjustment lower than its current budget would be the city of Sedona. Every other city looks at permanent base as a future-oriented initiative, and their adjustments far exceed their current spending.
So in closing, we would like to ask you to vote yes for home rule because Sedona has a history of responsible fiscal management. Let's keep local control. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly and Andrea. Do you have cards for me?
Not yet. Ask people to.
If we could ask everyone to please hand in their cards so we could start asking the questions. Or just bring a couple of them up to me. We don't need to wait for all of them so we can get moving.
Sit here at the table for this.
Okay, here's the first question, and we're going to have someone here helping me to sort them a little bit. We're going to start with Andrea and Holly on this question. We see signs around town with the slogan, "If you hate traffic, vote no on home rule." How does a no vote affect traffic?
Actually, it's the reverse. If you vote no on home rule, traffic will be worse because there won't be any funding for the traffic improvements that the city has put into place.
And I'd like to ask this side for the same question.
Oh, was that all the answer? Oh, okay. I'd like to have said reduce traffic or limit traffic, vote no, but if you start using words that long, you can't see it when you're going down the highway at 35 miles an hour. The whole idea is we've got a lot of folks coming in here. They're driven by a lot of advertising, a lot of promotion, according to the GPS tracks that we've uncovered, and it's probably pretty public knowledge. About 60% of the people driving through here are driving through here on the way to the Grand Canyon. They don't really even stop. So if we're going to spend a whole bunch of money and we're going to keep promoting Sedona as we are, we're going to keep getting traffic, and that's the whole idea. We need to reduce the traffic. We need to reduce the amount of people coming through here. At least give them the opportunity at both ends of the main two roads, and we are never going to have more than two roads. We need to understand that. If people see a traffic jam or back up at I-17 and 179, and they see the same thing in 89A at the roundabout up north, there's a good chance they're not going to come through our town, at least this time. That's one thing we can do. And there's other mitigating things that we can do to help our traffic flow through here. So the whole idea is throwing a whole bunch more money at what we're already doing isn't working, and continuing to throw money at promotion to drive more people here is not going to get the job done. And that's why we set the sign up, so you could read it, and so I'd get questions like this. Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll start with this side now. On the next
Mary, we'd like to request a rebuttal. Is that not possible in this context?
You may have a 1-minute rebuttal, and then this side will then be allowed a 1-minute rebuttal.
Thank you. So on the issue of traffic, the tourists that we're attracting is dependent on work that's being done by the Tourism Bureau. And over the last few years, from 2014 to 2017, the number of room nights in Sedona has increased by just 6%, while the average daily rate, or what we're charging for those rooms, has increased 28%. So what we've actually been able to do is keep the people that are coming in and staying in Sedona at a relatively stable rate, but we're charging them more and collecting more in sales tax revenue.
Thank you. And we may have a rebuttal on this side. 1 minute.
Is this on? Yeah. Okay. One thing that's really important to understand, that our occupancy rates are pretty much flatlined, and even though we've increased our rates, our hotel rooms are not high-end hotel rooms anymore. You know, the rates are very low in comparison to other high-end destination locations. If you look at the national average of occupancy, it's 65%, and Sedona only has 68.8% according to the city manager's budget.
Thank you. Okay, now we will go on to the next question, and as I said, we will have 2 minutes for the question, and if there is a rebuttal, I will allow 1 minute per side. Mike and Donna Joy, this question begins with you. Why do you think Sedona residents have repeatedly voted for home rule in the past?
I did. I did 4 years ago because I had confidence in the city council and the people that were running the show. In fact, I held fundraisers for those people. And what's happened is we've had, as you saw, we've had increases in costs, we've had increases in personnel, we've had mismanagement. We got $2.5 million going to the Chamber of Commerce with no audit. I'm on the board of directors for a $4 billion company and their audit committee chairman, and you're going to give an outfit $2.5 million and not have a specification for an audit that is written by the people granting the funds with an audit plan to come back? We don't know what's going on. It was turned down. Well, back when Cliff Hamilton was around, it was voted down. It was voted down. Mr. Caravan tried to do it. I don't understand why the council doesn't demand that. I mean, that's just common sense. We want to know where our money's going. We want to know how it's being spent. We want to know how it's being mixed.
The city council that you voted for was the one who entered into the contract with the Chamber of Commerce. That's not a new contract. And in fact, the city renegotiated that contract last year when it was up for renewal. And there are provisions for audits in the new contract. The other thing I wanted to mention just a minute ago is think about this. We want to potentially cede back our authority to the state. The state did a great job for us in passing SB 1350, Airbnbs. Why do you think that we had traffic in in April and May of this year. It was not because the hotel rooms went up. It was not because the chamber advertised to bring people to Sedona. It was because of Airbnbs. So think about that.
And back to the original question, why did people vote for home rule in the past? I think that people have voted for home rule in the past because they want local control and they want their elected council to be able to set a budget in accordance with the available resources.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Yes? 1 minute?
Okay, when it comes to the Chamber of Commerce and their contract, when it was originally proposed in 2013, the City Council promised that it was only going to be for 1 year to kickstart our city. The in-city businesses and the in-city hotel owners did not get their own voice in the matter. The Chamber gets the money. Only 3% of their members collect the bed tax that they are gifted. And that's wrong. They have a large membership group, it's a membership, and they should get their own dues. It's not up to the taxpayers to subsidize the hotels. That's part of their industry, is to pay for their own marketing, and it's not ours. And it's completely unfair to put the burden on the hotels inside the city limits with a 14% higher bed tax and sales tax for the city of Sedona to turn around and use those tax dollars for the region.
Thank you.
I just want to get back to the more general issue of home rule. And I know that there are some concerns about the chamber contract. Overall, the chamber has done an amazing job of managing tourism for this town. You saw that during the recession, our revenues were only down 14%, and that is in large part because of the good work that the chamber did. However, we need to put the issue of that contract aside because home rule is a much bigger issue. And if this is voted down specifically because of the chamber, there is going to be a lot of collateral damage. The library, the community pool, the Humane Society, other organizations will suffer if that happens.
Thank you. The next question, and I believe we start on this side. Who set the $25 million limit for PBA?
We went back and took, well, we did. I mean, the Arizona Liberty and PAC. What we did is we went back and we took a look at the expenses, or the actual audited statements of the city, which I showed you earlier, going back when the last home rule was passed. And we did an analysis of that, and if you think that's easy to go through those financial statements in hundreds of hours and then go through a 330-page budget going future, it can be very challenging. And we wanted to have a number in there that was fair, a number that would not hurt the city. I live here too. I support a lot of these charities. I do a lot of stuff for the folks around here, and a lot of people here know that. We were uncomfortable with the way the expenses were being escalated at the city. We were uncomfortable with no population growth, of the increased in overhead, salaries, expansion. Just doesn't make any sense. So we said we have to have some limits here, but we don't want to hurt what's going on right now. And all this nonsense about losing this and losing that, and somebody's not going to get their Meals on Wheels and stuff. It's absolutely insane. Nobody's paying attention. I mean, I'm sorry that somebody actually went on our website and saw our presentation and thought that's what I was going to talk about tonight. No, there is no $24 million, folks. It ain't going to happen because you're not going to let it happen. You're going to put $36 million on there. Whether home rule passes or not, it's your responsibility to make that permanent base adjustment vote in November. And if we go back 2 years and we can get through this thing, that's fine. Let's revisit it, and let's see who's on the council in 2 years. Maybe home rule should come back again. But right now, this disparaging number here between 49, which is a hoax, and 24 is not real.
Thank you.
What was the question?
I'd be happy to ask it again. Who set the $25 million limit for PBA?
I think that question was answered, and I want to make a statement. I mentioned that there was a fiscal sustainability work group. We worked, 8 members of your community worked for 18 months to evaluate how to fund capital improvement projects going forward. We need to do something like that again. Maybe permanent base adjustment is a good idea. I don't know. We haven't looked at it. Nobody has studied it or looked at the consequences, intended or unintended consequences. I just don't see how you can pick a number out of the air and decide, especially when it's less than we're currently spending, and think that that's a forward-looking number. Remember, this is permanent base adjustment. It's not every 2 years. It's not designed to keep voters voting for it. It's supposed to look to the future, and as you saw, other cities who have it, their gap is huge between what their current spending is and what their permanent base adjustment is, because it's future-oriented. So I say, let's look at it, let's study it, let's make recommendations, and if it's appropriate, whatever the level of appropriateness means after a study is completed, let's put it on the ballot in 2 years, but not now.
Thank you.
Rebuttal?
Yes.
It is on the ballot. Okay, it's on the ballot in November. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. Permanent base adjustment can be adjusted every 2 years, every even election cycle, every year, whether it's a general election or a primary. So you can go back. The voters can say, I want to change this. And I'm really upset when it comes to, hey, we got to study it. On April 10th in the city council meeting, it was recommended by a councilman to direct staff to come up with a report on permanent base adjustment and report back to the council. April 10th. It was rejected by the council. It was again asked to be done on June 26th of this year. And when I got up there and I said, look, we've got this through the Auditor General, we will help the city fast walk this number through. Whether it's the right number or not, 36 million was ready to go, and it could have been a 2/3 vote, and it would have been on the ballot in November, and then you would still have the opportunity to vote on home rule. And we probably wouldn't be here tonight. But the city rejected it. They didn't want to do it, and you had 6 council members who said no.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
My understanding is that the city council did reject putting a permanent base adjustment on the ballot in November. However, they didn't reject it out of hand. Their view was that there wasn't sufficient time to study it in enough depth before the November ballot. So they recommended putting it off to study it in depth, to open it up to community conversations, to get input, and to put it on the ballot at a later time.
Thank you. The next question builds on the $25 million we were just talking about. It is originally directed to those who want to have the $25 million, but since it's this turn to start, I'm going to start over here and let you answer it. The question is, what would you cut in the budget to stay within the $25 million goal? And I'm asking this side then, this side would cut, why would you not cut?
I can't answer that question. I mean, that's an impossible question to answer, to say, it's so complicated. What particular line item would you cut? I just don't know how to answer it.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Mike and Donna Joy, if you're...
If you're going to set a budget, and you're going to do it properly, you're going to do a zero-based budget. A zero-based budget means you look at every line item, you look at every personnel, you look at every process and procedure, and you do it every year, and you start at zero. What is it going to take to get it done? You don't do additive, automatic increases in just the general spread, of your organization. And again, I found it very interesting and informative when Justin gave his presentation to the City Council on June 26th, the first part of it. And if you want to watch it, go get a scotch and sit there and watch it. That's what you have to do, because it's a number deal, and he basically tells the city, what do we have to do if home rule fails and you go to that $24 million number? And he went through a lot of, and it was a very high level thing. I mean, he couldn't go into detail because you just can't do it, when that, you gotta give a picture. And he gave a pretty good picture. And I'm sitting there as a business guy responsible for, overseeing and having people report to a board of directors. There was all kinds of things in there. Well, we can do without this, we can do without that, and yeah, we could probably back this off a little bit, and so on. It was more detailed than that. I mean, he did have a good program based on the time he had to deliver it. My question is, why isn't that being done now? Why are we having these kind of expenses in overhead in other areas of the city? Why aren't we paying our cops more, for Christ's sake? Why are we have this, what is this sustainability person? What do they do? this has to be started at zero. You put a permanent base adjustment in there with some caps, you're going to have to make some decisions. They may not be the easy decision, maybe some hard decisions, and then you revisit it. You got 2 years, and you got 2 times to do an override if you have to. That's not hard. Next May, hey, I need a bunch of money. Put a ballot issue out.
Thank you.
For fiscal conservatism, I find it interesting to suggest we keep going back for ballots. Each election costs $25,000. Why don't we just pass home rule? If you don't like your council members, vote them out. Vote other people in. Why tie their hands? Why go backwards instead of going forward? We live in a democracy. You vote for the people that you think represent you.
And I will say that I think that the city is making a hire for a sustainability officer because sustainability is one of the key values that was identified in the Sedona Community Plan. It's repeatedly something that we care about. And one of the concerns that we all have is keeping this place beautiful and preserving our environment, the amazing reason we all moved here. So I think bringing someone in to look at and focus on sustainability is essential for our community and our region.
Did you want to have a rebuttal?
No, not really.
Okay. If home rule passes, the uptown construction will happen. How would the stores and restaurants survive construction? Why should the Cowboy Club lose their outdoor area for a roundabout? And I think we're this side to start. Mike and Donna Joy.
I don't think they should lose their outdoor restaurant. I don't think we should have pedestrian up, stairs and that kind of thing with ADA crossings. I don't think we should make Uptown look like Las Vegas. And I said earlier, you start putting these programs in, especially in Uptown where there are traffic issues. That's a permanent change to the city. That's a permanent change to the way things look. One of the retailers there that was at the Pulse meeting last Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, no, Monday or Tuesday, it was 8 o'clock over at Red's. He was quite upset. He said, I've had a candy store over there. I don't know if it's 30 years or 40 years, but it was a long time. He says, I'm selling candies to the grandkids that the parents that I sold. That's how long he's been there. And he said, one thing that has never been considered on all this stuff is the human traffic patterns. They all talk about cars, but they said the human traffic pattern. He said, I know how the people walk around here, and that's part of my business. And that traffic pattern is very important to me and my business. And he said, nobody's even taken a look at it. And one of my point was earlier that you're going to spend $10 million on some kind of Sedona in motion and spending all this money and so on, when you have questions like that haven't even been addressed. I saw the rendering. You've all seen the rendering. It's beautiful. Renderings are great, of the 2 lanes going down, in my opinion, the wrong way. But it's there, and they're going to lose a bunch of parking lots or parking spaces on one side. That's all very pretty until you start backing off and taking a look at, well, what is the unintended consequences? Y'all know about slip lanes? You know how slip lanes work? I won't get into it, but my goodness, I saw where these slip lanes were going to be put in, and it want to make my head explode. You can't put 3 lanes down into 1 lane, folks, and make it go faster. It don't work that way. Now, we got 2 roads in this town. We're never going to have any more than 2 roads, and we've got to figure out how we're going to manage these 2 roads. And overhead passes and all this other kind of stuff, and routing, things to through neighborhoods. That's not the answer.
Thank you.
I know that we've been cast up here as the pro-home rule side and the anti-home rule side, and in some ways that's really unfortunate because we really are all one community. And I don't think every issue that we're discussing up here tonight is one where we're necessarily opposed. Everybody here in Sedona knows that traffic is an issue. Everybody's been caught in the traffic. Everybody wants traffic to improve. I think that the community will continue to have open discussions about the best way to handle that. Sedona in Motion is a great step forward with some concrete steps we can take, but I think that it's an issue we have to continue to discuss, and the city's made it possible for us to discuss that, and it's something that I think we all want resolved, and so hopefully we could all come together and work on a solution that is amenable to all parties.
Thank you.
As a business owner, I've operated businesses inside the city limits for over 25 years. 10 of those years were in Uptown. And this is a disaster to our small merchants. And I was appalled when I heard the city council meeting where they said they never checked because their leases were coming up. Every single one of those small merchants that have a business in Uptown pay exorbitant rents. And not only do they pay exorbitant rents, but our city charges 3.5% sales tax on their rent. If you do this, you're going to drive more of your small businesses out. Now is the time to stop. There's a lot of unintended consequences, and your small town charm is going right out the door with these items.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I think I start on this side. How do you get the figure of 70% of the city budget being paid by the tourists?
So I think I know the answer to this, but if I don't, Holly's going to correct me. So I think that the other 30% of the general fund comes from state shared revenues and from grants.
And permits and other non-tax revenue. But how did we get that? We took the bed tax and the sales tax and divided it into the revenue, and that was the number.
I've got the sales tax.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to break this into two different parts. If you take all of the sales tax and you take all of the bed tax, it's only 44% according to the city's own records. How in the heck did the people that live here, that every time we build something or we get a delivery, we get charged sales tax, how do we have no contribution to these numbers? This is just blatantly wrong. And when you look at the sewer, 17% is coming from the hotels. I mean, come on, folks. These numbers are fudged, and I'm sorry that we're getting thrown under the bus in regards to that. Our contributions come from many more items than just bed tax and sales tax.
Yeah, and I wish I had current numbers. I'd go back to 2014, but without going into the numbers, because there are pretty good numbers that come in as far as dollars. You've got vehicle taxes from Yavapai, Coconino. You got state income tax. You got state sales tax. These are all in HERF. You got these numbers that are all coming back into the city coffers. So there is other dollars that come in here, and they come in here on a regular basis. And then plus, we got our own sales tax. We just kicked up 0.5%. So yeah, we are paying for additional services also that the city has. So it's a variable thing. It goes up and down. But to say that we've got this unbelievably huge deal that is coming in from the tourists, yeah, it is pretty good size, and I like it because I like the funding that comes in here. But let's get real. Those people are still going to come here, right? I've been coming here for a very long time, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I would like to see them coming here to be doing some other things, and maybe we have some other investments in town that would cause them to stay a little bit longer. We've only got really one high-end resort, and that's Enchantment, and a lot of people may stay out there for a while, but yeah, that's right. It's a great place, but it doesn't collect any sales tax or bed tax, so that's a problem. So it's a variable thing. It's all over the place. It's a balance that we have, so I think we can probably keep it.
Thank you.
I would just urge you all to go onto the city's website where the sales taxes and the bed taxes by year are available. And you can look at them and you can add them up and you can see how much revenue is coming from those taxes into the city. And then you can look at the expenditures and you can divide the two numbers and then you'll see what the answer is.
Do you want to make final comments, Don or Mike?
No.
Okay.
I want to have a drink.
The next question is, do you know what the highest bond rating is that is possible? And we can pay our city staff 2 times that paid by private companies in the city. Okay, and pardon me, I'm trying to decipher the questions. Do you know what the highest bond rating is possible? And does this tie into why we can pay our city staff 2 times that paid by private companies in the city? And I believe we start with Mike and Donna Joy.
Okay, so I'm glad we got a good bond rating. It means we're paying our bills. I'm not sure how that really ties into what we're paying the staff. I do know that there's what's called an M rating, and the M rating goes, so I think it's from 1 to whatever, and that's a cap for each one of the positions that people are hired for. It's like a G rating for the government. So somebody's on a G10, G12, or whatever. I think the highest salaries we have right here is Mr. Clifton and an attorney, somewhere around 156,000, 158,000, something like that. I could be wrong. I had the number in my head, but I don't right now. It's 159, and you can pretty much add about 45 to 45 to 48% on top of that for benefits. That's pretty good. Down $10,000, and I'd want to work real hard to protect my job too. Maybe he's worth it, maybe he's not. I don't know Justin that well. Hopefully I'll get to know him better, in the future, and get a little council change, and we can help the new council work with the city manager, because just like we did on the fire board, that program isn't open. We're going to be jumping into that program too. I see Chris back there. Hey, Chris. Yeah.
Holly?
I'm glad that somebody asked this question, because the Fiscal Sustainability Workgroup and our report is available, again, on the website of the city. We looked at the employment picture and pattern in the city, and we were very distressed by it, actually. The attrition rate, well, first of all, during the recession, all salaries were frozen. So 4 years, the city staff got no raises. The attrition rate averaged 20% per year. And anybody who's been in business knows that that is terrible. That is expensive for retraining and hiring. But the city was having a lot of difficulties recruiting people. Number one, the cost of living here is so high. People can't afford to live here. Our salaries were not commensurate with Cottonwood and Flagstaff. We were paying much lower than our neighboring cities. And if people can't live in Sedona and they live in Cottonwood, then they have to pay commuting costs. I don't know where this number of 2 times comes from, but if you look at the cities around us, and we recommended, by the way, this fiscally conservative group of people recommended that the city do a salary study and increase the salaries of the employees so that they would stay in the city. The police department lost 25 and 30% a year because they could go to Flagstaff, Cottonwood, state police, and make a lot more money. So it was not a healthy situation.
Thank you. Did you have a?
Yes, please. I would like to bring up that the average Sedona person makes $56,000, and I'd like to also bring up is these business owners that are getting nickeled and dimed to death, paying all these additional fees. If you really think that somebody's going to stick around and work their tushes off for nothing, it's not going to happen. We have a labor problem here. The average person is 57, 58 years old, and they don't want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and work 7 days a week. So the labor issue is an issue. We shouldn't be throwing money at people just to have people in place. We need to get the right people, the right jobs efficiently, and they need to have programs in place for improvement. It's not just buy and spend. It should be improvement, and how do we make improvements at our local level?
And the only thing I'd add to that is we need to relook at the transportation issues of moving people back and forth from Clarkdale and Cottonwood, and this where it's a little more affordable. And when it comes to the whole lodging industry, I think they need to be in there also helping fund these kind of programs.
Thank you.
I agree. It is a huge problem. We do not have the labor pool locally to fill the jobs that are available here, especially the technical jobs. And so that causes recruiting outside of Sedona. And I've sat on some of the panels interviewing candidates, and you can get right up to making an offer, and then somebody just starts looking at the housing costs, and all of a sudden they don't want to move here. So it's a real issue that I think we need to address. as a community. And it's not about throwing money at people. It's about filling positions with qualified people who will be willing to live here, given the situation, and have long commutes.
Thank you. And I guess I'm going to do a follow-up question because this is about home rule, what our forum is about tonight. So I want to talk about the impact of home rule on staff, on salaries. I think that's where it fits in. I want to start with this side. So what is, Mike and Donna Joy, what are you recommending as it relates to home rule and the current staffing and salaries of the city of Sedona?
Well, as I said earlier, Justin went through a program and he said there's some places he could cut and some things he could do. And again, we have not, we've had this expansion in on our city staff for the last 4 or 5 years with no really expansion of folks. So, you know what, we should have a balance of being able to reduce staff, finding the highest qualified people and taking maybe 50% of those savings when you lose a person or let go a person and get a better person and pay them more money to make their jobs easier and make their lives a little better and so on. It's not just how much money you pay them, it's the efficiency of that person or the job and that cost per employee and what their productivity is. And if you don't look at every single person like that, you're not going to be able to get that done. And that's what we do in business, that's what a city should do. It's not the number of people you have and what you're paying, it's the quality of the people you have and what kind of job can they turn out. And we just don't see that being done. You can't have this kind of increase with no additional load because you don't have any more folks. And I'm a firm believer, it's upsetting to see what we pay our police officers. And when you take a look at the full, you know, all the rankings and all the people, which we do, and we didn't have time to use that tonight and because there's just too much going on, it's rather upsetting. It's not fair. So.
Thank you.
So I would just take a different slant to this. The number of full-time equivalent employees is less today than it was in 2009. So while it may be more, again, remember, numbers can be manipulated. While it may be more than the lowest point in the recession of 2011, it is not as high as 2009. Let's talk about workload for a minute. I mentioned that the police had huge issues, 25, 30% a year attrition. Now they're fully staffed. So what happens when the police are fully staffed? They write more tickets, they arrest more people, the workload of the court goes up. So this is a ecosystem. And now things, look all around, you see construction everywhere. We need building inspectors, we need permit people. All those people were eliminated, not the entire staff, but a lot of the staff were eliminated during the recession. When there was no building, there was no need for building staff. Now there is. So you have to hire people back. You have to hire people to meet this workload. So those are just two examples that you can all relate to of why some of the staffing has increased.
Thank you.
The only comment I have that the recession was in 2007, this is 10 years later, and I really get tired of hearing about the recession. I mean, my God, how long the recession is going to go on and how many years are we going to blame it on a recession that's been over for 10 years and the country's been actually doing quite well? This is just, I don't know, it's frustrating. And it's like, come on, you know, what are we doing here? I just don't understand it. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make any sense what we're going back there and talking about recessions. It's been over for a long time. It was 10 years ago. We were rocking and rolling pretty good in 2014 and 2015. In the last 4 years, we've had increases, and I go back to that. Why?
I would just say that the recession hit Sedona in 2011, not 2007. That might have been the rest of the country. But if you look at your little budget here, you will see that the revenues declined the most in 2011, and that's when a lot of things stopped. We met our budget, we met our spending, revenues met our spending, and now we're climbing back. and workload has increased. And we are hiring the staff to meet that workload. But it is not as high as pre-recession staff in 2008 and 9.
Okay, I have a question, Holly. This is just for you because you're on one of the finance committees. When was the last time Sedona had an independent audit? Do you have an answer to that?
Every year.
Every year? Thank you. Okay, it seems like locals suffer at the hands of tourists. Thousands have been spent in traffic studies with no solutions. We are concerned about Sedona in Motion working. Tell us what Sedona in Motion is and how it would be impacted by your choice on home rule. And I think, Mike and Donna, we start with you.
I'll say just a couple words. Sedona in Motion, we need to slow it down. We're moving so fast, we don't even know what the unintended consequences are. So we want to go through neighborhoods, we want to do connector roads, and to be quite honestly, I bought my house because I can't have a connector road in that location. I bought it for security, I bought it in particular for those reasons. Sedona in Motion is moving way too fast, and we need to slow it down, and we need to get the public engaged in it.
I'd rather call it Sedona in slow motion. And a play on words, but there are good things in here. There's 13 points, I believe, and looked at all of them, and there's some things that really make some sense that don't cost a lot of money. The signs on the interstates I talked about earlier. We've been trying to get ADOT to do that for several years. And Sedona brings a lot of money to this state, millions of dollars. We have a lot of power, and we should be using it down at the State House. We should have representatives, our council member, designated council member down there, and standing on their desk and say, we got a problem up here, we need your help, and don't cost a lot, and if we have to throw a few bucks on it to help you out, it can be done. I guarantee if somebody's on the way to the Grand Canyon and that's their what they want to do, and that we got a beautiful road here, we got 2 of them, and they want to drive through here to see them, God bless them, come through here and do it. But if they're on the way to Grand Canyon and they see a sign that says 45 or 50-minute delay, chances are they're going to go up the interstate and they're not going to come on our road. Same way coming down the other way. So that's not pushing people out. That's not taking anything away. So there's other things we can do. We can open up that chain link fence over there. I want to know why it's not opened up on the parking lot at Tlaquepaque there, the gravel parking lot, and start dumping traffic out on Brewer Road. You know how much traffic is stopped on 179 because 360-degree turns are made at the Schnebly roundabout because people have to make a right-hand turn and they got to go all down. I've sat there and watched 3 or 4 or 5 cars do that.
Thank you.
Sedona in Motion is an attempt to resolve some of the very tricky traffic issues that we have. And I believe the question was, how would home rule affect that? One way home rule would affect that is that we would not have the funding available to implement any of the strategies recommended by the strategic plan. Now, I don't think anybody thinks that traffic is an easy issue for us or that it can be, there's a quick fix or a panacea. I mean, we have scenic highways that come into Sedona. We're 100 miles from the Grand Canyon. We have traffic. We're going to continue to have traffic. It's something that we're going to have to continue to work on. Sedona in Motion is an attempt to do that. I think a few weeks ago, Andy Dickey made a presentation. He invited anyone to call him, to talk to him. I don't think that this issue is settled. We're going to need more community conversation, but we'll also need resources to deal with this so we can implement traffic solutions. And it's only through passing home rule that we'll have that opportunity.
Passing home rule has got nothing to do with talking and looking and analyzing and so on. It just doesn't. We already have dollars to do a few things. In fact, we have dollars to do more than a few things. And the things we talked about don't cost that much money. Maybe I used the wrong terminology. Maybe it ought to be Sedona in action. More studies, there's small things that we can do, and we can just see if that helps. You make a change, you see what the reaction is. You make a change, see what the reaction is. Some of these things, a lot of things just don't cost that much money to do. So to say we have to go off, do all this home rule stuff, and nothing's going to happen if we don't, is a fallacy. If you have a big project, and we get an opportunity to build a road and cut a hole in a mountain or something like that, do a permanent basis or a 1-year override, take the money and do it for Christ's sake. But it's not going to happen. We can do things today, but we got to start doing them and quit talking about them. And there's some small things that can be done to help mitigate the problem.
Thank you.
The transportation study resulted in
more studies.
The potential for $120 million in projects. And it was up to the council to go through that study and prioritize. First of all, we weren't going to spend $120 million, but to look at what was doable, what was possible, and out of that, they came up with $35 million budget over 10 years. Remember that, over 10 years. The things that Mike just talked about are included in Sedona in Motion. The signs on Interstate 17 and the yellow shirts. Aren't the yellow shirts doing a really good job? That all came out of Sedona in Motion, and they're part of the Sedona in Motion plan. So you can pick apart, we don't like Forest Road, we don't like a roundabout. You can pick out different pieces of that and say, I don't like that, but you have to look at it in totality, and I have to stop.
Thank you. I think I start with this side this time. If people are unhappy with the way the money is being spent, doesn't the real question have to do with who we elect rather than giving our city up to state control? Are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Yes, it absolutely has to do with who we elect. I mean, passing home rule, all that does is it doesn't tie the hands of whoever the city council is. It just enables the city to budget with the available resources. If you don't like the way the current city council is setting the budget or managing those resources or the other decisions that they're making, you have the opportunity to vote for new city councilors. That's certainly an option. But if you vote no for home rule, whoever those people are, whoever those counselors are, will simply have their hands tied. They will be forced to operate with state-imposed limitations.
Thank you.
So we basically are under state guidelines. So even if we have home rule, we have to follow the guidelines of the state of Arizona. Home rule, permanent base, one-time overrides. If you think it's a free money deal, it's not. The state of Arizona controls us, and we have to follow the rules. The city needs your vote, and our state has been great. They've empowered you with the vote, that you can vote the best selection for how your money is spent.
Yeah, I hear all this conversations about how the state mandates, what we can spend and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't make a difference which one of the items you pick. The state is going to be involved. When we went down to the state and we said we want to do $36 million, they had to make sure that, we showed them where the city had the revenue to support that, and this is a good number, and so on. Even if you're doing a home rule, you just can't set it at some, or I'm sorry, permanent base, you can't set it at some astronomical limit. That still has to be approved. All these numbers have to be approved because the cities are not allowed to print money. Only government, only the feds can do that. So it has to be a balanced environment. So to say, oh my God, the state's coming down, they're going to control everything. They ought to say in everything we do. So don't take that, as some kind of different thing from each one of those categories. The state is always involved when you set those numbers. And that's important for you to know. And we went down there because we didn't understand this. It wasn't easy, folks. So we made trips down to the Auditor Generals and sat down there and asked them, how does this work? And we did it more than once. Because you know what they said? There's never been a citizens committee that has put an initiative on a ballot in the state of Arizona. We're in new territory here. But we did it. So now you have the opportunity to save the city in November. That's pretty cool, huh?
Under home rule, the state does not control our budget, does not control our spending. We control it. Don't be misled. We control it. We can spend up to our budgeted amount based on the resources we have available and the revenue that comes into this city without the state interfering at all.
Okay, here we go. Home rule is an estimate, folks. And yes, she is correct that your city council can tell you, like they have 4 years ago, that they were only going to spend $36 million a year, and yet they put in the budget for 49.5 when they promised you in the estimate for $36 million. In this regard, home rule, that particular portion of it, allows the city council to spend what they want. If you go to a permanent base, it's under control, you're more involved. So I see less control on the residential, the voters with the home rule, more control, more involvement with permanent base, and more control and more involvement when you do the one-time overrides.
Thank you. This will be for Mike and Donna Joy. What is the Attorney General investigation all about? Would you like to comment on that, please?
My understanding it's a 1487 challenge or violation of a relationship that the city has with its relationship with the chamber. I can tell you that since 1487 was passed, that this challenge was attempted multiple times by multiple citizens in the city since the day that law was passed. Obviously, it was successful this time. There's a flyer on the back if you want to read about it. You'll see it in the newspaper tomorrow. So we didn't file it. We knew about it. And time we peel back the onion and see what's underneath it, and hopefully they'll get to the bottom of some of the questions we have.
Thank you.
We're not going to comment on a legal matter.
Fine. This question is, were there paid circulators used in the PBA initiative for November?
I don't think we can answer that question.
No. We had 20 people. 16 of them were citizens, residents here, and we had 4 volunteers come out of Phoenix. And that's it. We had to have as many people as we could. We had to get 429 signatures in 9 days. And we got 639 in 9 days, especially when people understood what they were signing for. And if I had another 10 or 12 days, we could have got 1,000 signatures. So, but that's, you know, there was 20 people involved, and 16 of the 20 were here, and 4 of them came out of Phoenix.
Thank you. Oak Creek Canyon on almost every weekend throughout the year has 3 to 4 mile backups. It also functions like a chimney in case of fire. If a fire were to occur on a weekend during one of these backups and the current logjam in Uptown still existed, deaths would occur. How would you deal with that, or what would you do to avoid that, and if you cancel the Uptown improvements? And I believe we start on this side.
I don't think that we're in a position to say how we would manage that public safety issue. But I will say that as far as the traffic backup, that the yellow shirts and people we've put in place to direct traffic have really helped that. And they're not in the canyon, but they are in Uptown, and they have significantly alleviated the traffic congestion that used to be experienced when you were traveling from the canyon through Uptown.
Thank you.
That'd be a good question for the county sheriff. It'd be a good question for our chief Kasian back here, because that's in the Sedona Fire District, the canyon, on how you evacuate people up there. And I'm sure, Chief, that you've got a plan in that if that happens. In fact, I would be willing to bet money that you have a plan to get those people out of there in an expedited manner, no matter what happens in Uptown. You get those guys coming in, they're going to get the canyon cleaned out.
Okay, this side. We have several questions related to permanent base adjustments, so I'm going to try to put some of them together, but I don't want to negate the questions that the audience is asking. If we had a permanent base adjustment and had to fund the gap with bonds, would we end up with, I believe it's a prosperity tax to pay these bonds, or property tax to pay these bonds?
No, the only way you get a property tax in Sedona is if the voters vote a property tax. So if you want to tax yourself, then I'm sure there's voters could put it on a ballot, and for property tax, it'd be a voter decision, yes or no. But that's the only way you get a property tax in Sedona.
These are speculative questions, so it's really hard to answer them. But if we had debt financing, then we would have to look at whether we needed to increase taxes to pay for it, or we reduce services to pay for it. But somehow it's got to get paid.
Thank you. How much would each override election that is needed cost the citizens of Sedona? Andrea?
$25,000 for each special election.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's 25 grand.
They said here that one side noted that there was a flat tourism rate from 2000 to 2017. How can that be right? And I'm not sure that that is a correct statement.
No.
Did you, Mike and Donna?
This is just from the experience that I had with doing the 179. We were trying to get numbers, and we got numbers. In fact, I think we got numbers from the chamber at that time. When they were doing the road design, because it initially was going to be like a 4-lane interstate coming in on 179, and we were afraid it was going to turn into commercial property on both sides and look like 69 going into Prescott Valley. It was a 4-year process. It was very tiring, and we did a lot of work on that. And we got got an award for the beautiful road out here. And one of the questions was how many tourists were coming in during that period of time. And the number that we got was between 3 and 4 million, and today it's still 3 and 4 million. Maybe there are different kinds of tourists or whatever, but we didn't really care. We were just concerned about how much traffic was coming in and how you're going to handle it, because when we had the expert traffic engineers coming in and doing a lot of design and working with this and working with the residents. I mean, a lot of you were here. We did the charrettes and everything, and it was a very community-involved program to do that road. There was a lot of people that did a lot of hard work on it, and that was one of the components that they had to consider when they were doing the roundabouts and all the other things that they had to do to get the roads done.
So I'm not sure what the numbers are from 2000 to 2017, but I do know that tourism continues to be a significant economic pillar of the state of Arizona. Our governor, Doug Ducey, has talked about that. Last year, tourism contributed roughly the same amount as agriculture to the Arizona economy, $24 billion. Tourism is important for this state, and tourism is important for this community. Last year, the Grand Canyon hit a record number of 6 million visitors. A lot of those people are coming to Sedona. We're a beautiful place. People are going to come here. Tourism is always going to be a part of Sedona, and so what we have to do is manage it responsibly.
Thank you. Did you have a rebuttal?
No,
Okay.
I think that's fine, and you're right. We have a lot of tourists coming through here. They're a very important part of our economy, and you have to have a balance. You have to have the balance between the people that live here and the tourists that are coming here. And I have to ask myself, how can we have any population increase? And I've known enough people here. I've been coming here since '86. I've had a house here since 1994, and I know people that were here, and it just didn't live up to what they thought it was going to be, and that was one of the reasons. So they've left. And I have examples right now going on in our neighborhood. I won't get into it here, obviously, but it's a quality of life of what you expect and then what you end up getting. And there has to be that balance. Tourists are important, our businesses are important, our hotels are important, and so on. Right now, we are not in balance.
Thank you. Did you want to make a final comment to that?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. I just want to comment that there were several other questions that were provided. They were directed, very honestly, to one specific side. All of our speakers will be available after the presentations so that you can individually ask them questions. I would also like to say we received several questions related to the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Bureau. This forum tonight was about home rule and not about the Sedona Chamber, so we did not ask those questions. And now we'd like to wrap up the forum with closing comments. We will sort of start backwards. So we will start our closing comments, which are 2 minutes, with Holly Ploog and Andrea Christelle.
Again, I really want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight, because I think even if we disagree on particular issues, one thing that everyone here cares about is the future of Sedona. And I've heard people say that communities are kind of like families. Does everybody here get along with everybody in their family and agree with them all the time? Probably not, but you're still a family. And I think it's really important that we still conceive of ourselves as a united community.
I recently saw Hamilton, and it got me thinking about our founders. And then I read an article recently by a local man who said that the principles that we stood for in fighting for our freedom from tyranny and injustice and from a ruler far, far away, he likened that to what's happening in Sedona today. So he said that the words of the founding fathers, all about no taxation without representation, all about keeping control of your destiny in the United States versus in England, they all related to how we're feeling about ceding our control to the state of Arizona to manage our affairs like King George did for the colonists. I thought it was kind of interesting. We live in, as I said earlier, in a representative democracy. So vote for who you think represents your interests, but don't tie their hands. We've gotten home rule confused, I think, with some people's views of the job that the council is performing. Please separate those.
Thank you.
I feel better standing up. I can see you guys better. The state of Arizona has given us an incredible opportunity. I don't know where we get this anywhere in any other state in the union. We have 3 options. We've talked about all of them tonight, the adjustments and all this kind of stuff. The important thing to know is you have that control. They have put that control in the hands of you. And it doesn't have to be every 2 years or every 4 years. You can do it every year if you want to. It's the flexibility that you have. And if you don't like something that's going on with your management, yeah, you can vote them out, but that may be ways down the road. Or you can also control with money, because money is control. Money is also power, and it can also be abused. You have that opportunity to make those decisions. And the reason you're here tonight is because you're paying attention. God bless you for being here. There's a whole bunch of people who are not. And for all the people that are on TV, thank you for watching. Because it's very important to understand that the state has given you that opportunity to put that control in your hand. Now, as a little self-promotion, we go into this every Tuesday night, and it's making me tired. At the church, we do a full presentation for 30 minutes, and then we have an hour to hour and a half full Q&A to get into details of all 3 of these. Our charts are much more detailed than we showed you tonight. Some of the people in here have seen this. I encourage all of you to take a look at the website. Come and take a look at it. Come visit us, where we can really get into some more detail if you didn't get enough tonight. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you people. Shows me that you're very concerned, and I'm as concerned about this city as every one of you are. Thanks.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Greater Verde Valley, I would like to thank our speakers for being here and for sharing the information and for your passion about home rule. I would also like to thank you, the audience, for being here, because as both sides have spoken, without you, we would have no community. And this dialogue and discussion is amazing, and it's wonderful, and it shows that we all care, and we do care. I'd like to remind you that Election Day is August 28th. The last day to register to vote, change your party registration, or update your address is July 30th. Early voting ballots will be mailed out the week of August 1st. Completed ballots can be returned by mail or dropped off at the election locations in Sedona. If you are registered as a non-designated independent, you can vote. When you go to your polling place, you will be asked to designate which party ballot you want. If you are a permanent early voter, you should have received a form from the county elections office which allowed you to select the party ballot you wish to vote. A ballot will not be mailed to unaffiliated voters until the elections office receives a form from you, the voter, indicating your ballot choice. You may also make your choice by contacting the county election office by phone, email, or through the early ballot request website for Yavapai and Coconino counties. As I said earlier, if your questions did not get answered, I know our speakers would be more than happy to chat with you after the forum this evening. I want to remind all of you to please vote, and thank you for coming.